Well, Kyle, thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation with me. You have been so phenomenal through our time working together, and your journey is so inspiring. So I do think that having other career coaches, maybe who are aspiring to build a career coaching business, or even maybe have been a career coaching business, but maybe feel like they hit a plateau, can learn from your journey. And like I was mentioning before we hit record, I love, love, love your niche. So definitely kudos to that because I do think you found a market fit really like because of your background on it. So congratulations. Thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Kyle, let's start before Opni. Tell me a little bit more about like your journey to become a career coach and how was your business looking like before working together?
Yeah, so before Opni, I'd worked in startups. Before Opni, I'd worked in startups for about 10 years. I joined Uber in the early days. I'd actually quit my job in Seattle. I'd moved to New York City, kind of pounded the pavement to land that job, and landed a job in startups, landed a job in early Uber. It completely changed my life and my career. And like that difference in like really hating this job that I had back in Seattle and then feeling kind of on fire in this like incredible environment where I was waking up early to get to work every day and working late when nobody was telling me I had to.
Yeah.
It was just like a completely different way of like experiencing what I was doing
Yeah.
every day. And so I would do impromptu coaching like with people just because my story was kind of
Yeah.
unique. And then after being laid off from Uber after working there for 7 years in 2020, that was really the genesis of when I started to think about creating a career coaching business because Uber had connected us with an outplacement service. It was really outdated. The information was not very good. It just was not helpful at all. And when I was broke moving to New York City, that was a very challenging job search. But this time I had way better financial resources. I had a way better network. I had way
Yeah.
more experience, way better skills. And it still was really hard. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, if this is this hard for me, how could I kind of improve this for other people, right? And so then I essentially, after I ended up re-executing the process that led me to Uber in the first place, landed this other awesome startup job, and then after that startup ended up closing a year later, I kind of saw the writing on the wall and for the layoffs and everything that's happened in tech, and so I then created the business and. To your point about like what it looked like before Opni, so I operated for about a year before we ended up getting
Mm-hmm.
connected. And it was really just kind of stumbling through learning, trying to pick up different things from different people, and a lot of stress, a lot of stress, a lot of doing things on my own, and doing things that didn't work. Or really, what would happen for me is I would build the business up into a specific like a certain level where it would like break and not just break the business but like break me from like a health perspective
Yeah.
and everything like that, and then I would have to pause and then restructure the entire thing. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey. It's definitely like but yeah, after we met, it was yeah, it was there was a clear path
Yeah.
after we met.
Let's talk a little bit more about from like after working together. What were some of the biggest aha moments or things that you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so I think that like one of the big things for me coming out of startups was that you had this like hiring budget, or there was a kind of a very clear path of like, at this point you need an operations manager and you
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of massive war chest to be able to pay somebody, 100,000, 150,000, whatever the
Yeah.
budget is. And I wasn't really the ones controlling the purse strings at the time. That was the founders, the C-suite, whatever. And I think that was one of the things that you and the team opened my eyes to, was that look, like, you are at a place right now where you can afford to bring somebody on,
Yeah.
where you can afford to have them come in, and that was like a complete game changer. Like, I think that allowing them to come in, your team working with them in order to build up the processes internally, it just like my mental health was better, the business health was better, it was far less stressful. We accelerated and kind of continued the business growth. So that was like really the big aha moment where it was just like, oh, you don't need to do everything yourself, and like everything is much better if you don't do it yourself, and you can focus on the things that are really important to the business, which is like no duh, but
Yeah.
like it's like a realization when you're so in it, to have somebody else outside be like, this is going really well. If you do this, this will help you accelerate.
How did the systems and processes that we help you implement affect your business?
So one of the reasons why I was excited to work with you
Yeah.
was because the systems and like you had developed the systems and processes
Yeah.
for the business, right? And it was very clear that whether it was content creation, whether it was audience growth, whether it was the sales funnel, whether it was the customer journey, like it was clear that like there was a path, there was systems, there was processes that you can follow, and of course add your own little
Yeah.
spice and flavor to that work. And so when I was getting started, I didn't know top of funnel engagement.
Yep.
Everything, I was just hoping that people were landing on my landing page and clicking on an application button and going through that process and jumping on a sales call. And so that was incredibly overwhelming. And that alone was incredibly helpful of like, okay, here's the different stages in the funnel. Here's how to track them in the software. Here's how often you should do it. Here's how we recommend you do it. So that was incredibly helpful. And then I think things like the post-sale process, the contracts, things like that, the onboarding flow, the onboarding process, the offboarding flow. So like, comprehensively, but really the big thing that was just a complete, like, I can sleep well at night was the fact that we weren't letting all of these leads out of the funnel at the top of the funnel on LinkedIn. And that was one of the first processes that you guys helped us with.
What advice would you give either younger Kyle thinking about starting this business or an aspiring career coach that is just starting their journey?
I think that there's a couple things. I think one thing is make sure that you love your niche. At least like that's the way that I approach it. Like we were chatting before before we started recording. And one of the things that I said was I kind of blended this thing that I love, which is startups, with what I'm good at or what my background is, which is this kind of unique experience that I had joining Uber in the early days and then joining another startup afterwards. And so like I love consuming all the podcasts to listen to who's raising money, who's hiring, the ecosystem. I love looking through the lists of companies every single week to see who's raising money, what crazy ideas coming out, like who's working on what. And kind of like being one of the first people to introduce people to that. Yeah. And so like, that's like fun for me. Like if I was like mowing the lawn outside, like that's what I would be listening to. And so I think that that's going to, if that's the environment that you're in, then you're just going to be far less likely to quit. Yeah. And like when the tough times are tough, you're going to be able to push through. But if you're not, if it's not something that you're super excited about, then I think it's going to be really hard. Yeah. So like that's one thing. I think that there's others, but yeah.
One of the things that you said that was really cool is like one day, like you would love to see that one of the persons that you place it at a startup ends up having like an amazing exit of like 20 million, 25 million. Right?
That's the goal. The goal that I have. So like I had this incredible experience, right? Like I got into Uber early, even just like the meager salary I was making at Uber was still double what I was making in this terrible cubicle data entry job in Seattle. So I thought that I hit the lottery. And then I got these stock options, which ultimately were worth a lot of money. And so like, that's the goal, right? Like the goal is like, that was such an insane experience for me that I feel so like blessed and so lucky that like what if I could create that for like, a handful of people, dozens of people, hundreds of people, and that's the goal. Like I've thought like, what if you could become essentially like the Tim Ferriss of startup job searching, and you could like break down the processes that all these people that made millions or tens of millions of dollars, use to get into these companies. How do they identify them? How they so like that's kind of like the vision, and like that's the hope, right? That like you create like generational wealth for all of these people that are like on fire building these awesome things and bringing these things to market in new industries.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that you've encountered as you've been building this business?
The biggest challenge, part of it's patience. Part of it's patience, and part of it's balance. I think that like I'm at a point in my life where I have 3 kids. Yeah. I'm 36 years old. And I see, particularly working in startups, it's like I see these people raising like millions or tens of millions of dollars and uh, and moving super fast, right? And just being okay to be like, part of the reason why I did this was so I can get my kids ready in the morning,
Yeah.
so I can take them to school every day, so I can pick them up every day, so I can do homework with them. Um, but the ambitious
Yep.
hustler in me is like, but
Yeah.
I should be growing. I need to put all this energy in, and I'm still putting a ton of energy in, but like, there's a little bit of friction there, and so I think that I've gotten in a good place to balance that. So that's one thing. I think that another thing is I'd done sales once in my career,
Yeah.
and I was selling T-shirts in college, like graphic tees to like fraternities and sororities around the country, and I was awful. And I think the majority of that was just because the product wasn't great. Like I didn't. I was
Yeah.
like, why do you need another T-shirt for some
Yeah.
stupid club event?
Yeah. Or
Uh,
another, yeah. For another outing. Another
yeah,
formal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I remember like when I was selling at Uber, it was I wasn't really selling. I was just kind of communicating to people,
Yeah.
and it came super natural. And so that was a big thing for me. It was just like hard, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like you're building a new skill. But I think that like the fact that I've been able to build that skill over the course of the last couple of years, it's like, okay, cool. Like what else can I learn,
Yeah.
right? And so like the big thing there is just like pretty much everything is learnable.
Yeah.
It just takes like a decent number of reps, and I think that like, uh, yeah, it's just so yeah. That's another one. I think like the final one is that I get so tied up emotionally with the success or
Yeah.
lack thereof of clients, and at a certain point, like you're giving them everything
Mhm.
that you possibly can, your time, your energy, your systems, your information, uh, but you can't be the one to like pull the trigger for them, and
Yeah.
you're not going to be on the interview calls. And so that's one of the other things is like kind of divorcing yourself from the outcome, still caring deeply about getting them the results, but just not kind of carrying that weight of a potentially stressful
Yeah.
situation for other folks.
No, absolutely. Kyle, again, thank you for this conversation. Thanks for being part of Opni, and congratulations on the business you're building.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.
Yeah.